I never thought the same hands that once held my son's, guiding him on how to tie a tie before his first job interview, would one day be brushed away by him in front of hundreds of smiling strangers under the golden light of his own wedding. My name is Stanley Cooper, 60 years old. I used to work at a local bank in Oregon. I'm the kind of man you walk past without noticing. Quiet, decent, unremarkable, maybe even invisible. But that's all right. You don't spend 30 years behind a teller window without learning how people treat what they think has no value. My wife Margaret taught me that dignity doesn't need an audience. She passed away in 2020 when our son Michael was 28. At her grave, I made a promise I'll raise him the way you did, with kindness, not money. And I kept it. Every day, every year since. The wedding took place on a bright summer afternoon at Lakeside Resort on the edge of Lake Champlain, Vermont. The kind of place that looks like it was built for photographs. Crystal chandeliers, imported flowers, and a band playing soft jazz for people who never needed to think about the price tag. The air smelled of orchids and expensive perfume, and the lake shimmered behind glass walls as if the whole world had been polished for the occasion. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. Except for one small detail: I wasn't seated inside. When I arrived at the reception desk after a 6-hour drive from Oregon, the young woman behind the counter smiled politely, then frowned when she looked at her list. "I'm sorry, Mr. Cooper," she said. "Your name isn't on the main guest chart. It's here under the overflow list. It looks like the bride's side managed the seating." She pointed down the hall to a folding table by the service door, half hidden behind a potted fern and a stack of catering trays. There it was, my seat. A small table for two next to the trash bins and the faint smell of disinfectant. I nodded. "Thank you." And that was all. People don't need to slap you to humiliate you. Sometimes they just hand you a seat in a place you don't belong. From inside, I could hear the laughter, the sound of glasses clinking, the DJ's voice echoing through the ballroom. "And now please welcome the bride's parents." Mr. and Mrs. Pierce. Thunderous applause followed. Not one person mentioned my name. No one even looked toward the hallway. Only the soft hum of the air conditioner and the faint perfume of lilies drifting through the door crack reminded me I still existed. I sat there quietly, my suit wrinkled from the long drive, the silver-wrapped wedding gift on my lap. My hands rested on it, still steady. Inside that box was something they didn't expect. Something that would change everything before the night was over. A man passed by, mid-50s, maybe dressed in a navy suit. He slowed, glancing at me. "Do you work here?" he asked. I smiled. "No, just waiting for the right moment to go in." He nodded, unsure, then moved on. Through the reflection in the glass door, I caught a glimpse of myself, a father in a wrinkled vest, sitting outside the world he helped build. At 60, I thought I've learned that silence is sometimes the last shield a man has to protect his dignity. The door opened with a soft hiss. Emily, the bride, stepped out, a vision, in white lace, every pearl and thread perfectly arranged, like a sculpture carved from frost. She stopped when she saw me. Her smile was small, rehearsed. "I thought you'd be more comfortable out here," she said. "It's a little crowded inside." Her tone was gentle, but her eyes said everything. I didn't belong in her world. I looked at her evenly. "As long as my son is happy," I said. She tilted her head, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then she turned, her perfume trailing behind her, sharp, expensive, the kind that clings to the air like smoke. When the door closed, the music changed. The first dance. "Can't Help Falling in Love." Elvis's voice drifted through the glass, and for a moment, I wasn't in Vermont anymore. I was back in our kitchen in Oregon. Margaret's hands were covered in flour, her laughter echoing through the small house as she sang along, and Michael, 7 years old, was twirling beside her, pretending to dance. That was the last time I'd seen pure joy in our home. A young waiter stepped through the service door carrying a tray of champagne. He paused when he saw me. "Sir, are you the groom's father?" I nodded. He hesitated. "They shouldn't have done that to you." I smiled, quiet and tired. "Don't worry, son. I'm used to it." He set a glass on my table. "Here, on the house." The glass trembled slightly as I lifted it. Tiny bubbles rose and burst under the light. Cold, golden, silent. Like the way grief feels when you've lived with it long enough to stop fighting it. I had imagined this day differently, that I'd stand beside Michael, shake his hand, mention his mother's name and tell him how proud she would have been. But instead, I was seated next to a trash bin, a quiet reminder that some people only invite you because they can't erase your bloodline. Inside, the MC's voice rang again. "Let's thank Mr. and Mrs. Pierce for raising such a wonderful daughter." More applause. Warm, joyful. Every clap like a nail hammered into the wall between us. No one said my name. No one thanked me, the man who had traded his vacations, his new shoes, his pain medication, and 30 years of his life for that son's education and future. I looked at the silver box again, my only trace in this perfect day. They thought it held a card, maybe a watch, something small, polite. But it held something far heavier, the kind of truth that can collapse a house built on lies. 30 years at a small Oregon bank teaches you things: how to read numbers, how to spot fake signatures, and how to keep quiet while people underestimate you. Every dollar I saved, every decision I made was for Michael. I believed I'd done the right thing until he met Emily Pierce. The girl with the perfect smile and the glass-cold eyes, the one who could charm a room and freeze a heart in the same breath. She didn't just walk into my son's life, she rewrote it. In less than 2 years, the boy who once fixed cars with me in the garage started wearing suits, speaking like he was giving press statements, and treating me like I was a branch of his past he'd outgrown. And now here I was in the hallway. Not by accident, by design. I sat back, listening to the faint laughter bleeding through the walls. My reflection shimmered faintly on the glass door. An old man on the outside, but a storm brewing quietly beneath his calm. They didn't know it yet, but this was the last time they'd ever underestimate the man they'd seated in the hallway. That night, as laughter and champagne echoed from the ballroom, a memory flickered across my mind, faint but sharp, like the glow of a match struck in the dark. It was Margaret, my wife, the only person who ever knew how to calm the storms inside me. 5 years earlier in Eugene, Oregon, I was still a senior employee at First Horizon Bank, the kind of man who found comfort in routine coffee at 700 emails at 800, and Margaret's voice reading student essays by the window, while the morning light brushed across her hair. Our little house sat at the end of a quiet street lined with maple trees. The roof creaked in winter, the porch leaned slightly, but it was ours, steady, warm, filled with the sound of pens scratching paper and the clack of my keyboard. A modest life, yes, but whole. Then came the phone call. The doctor asked to speak with me in private. On the wall of his office hung a calendar with yellow daisies. On his desk, a thin folder with my wife's name printed in black ink, Margaret Cooper, stage 3rd. I don't remember most of what he said, just the weight in his voice and how my hands went numb as I clutched the edge of my chair. When I got home, I stood outside the door for a long time before opening it. Margaret was by the window, red pen in hand, glasses slipping down her nose. When she looked up, there was no surprise in her eyes, just calm, like she already knew. "I don't want you to see me as a patient," she said softly. "I want you to help me prepare for Michael." That night we sat at the kitchen table. The light above us hummed faintly, casting small pools of yellow across the wooden surface. Margaret opened her notebook, uncapped her pen, and began to write, slow, neat, deliberate. I can still see her handwriting. Trust fund. $250,000 for Michael Cooper. Released upon marriage to a partner chosen out of love, not ambition. She signed it, folded the paper, and slipped it into a brown envelope. On the flap, she wrote in her careful script for Michael when he's ready. I hesitated. "Are you sure?" I asked. "That's everything we've saved, all these years." She smiled that small, tired smile I'd seen 1,000 times. "Money only matters if it teaches something, Stanley. And if one day our son forgets what love really means, this might remind him, or at least remind him of us." I didn't argue. Margaret's final word was always the right one. A month later, she was gone. That morning, rain fell like fine silver threads, soft and endless. Michael made it in time. He stood by her bedside, holding her hand, unable to speak. Margaret opened her eyes one last time and whispered, "Be kind even when the world isn't." Then she smiled, and that was it. I buried her at St. Peter's Cemetery beneath an old oak that still flowers in spring. The funeral was small, a few of my colleagues, some of her students, and Michael, who stood silently beside me, not crying, not speaking. When the last handful of dirt fell onto the coffin, I whispered into the cold air, "I promise, Margaret, no matter what happens, I'll keep my word." 5 years passed. The house remained the same quiet, lined with her books, and the faint scent of tea leaves. Her teacup still sat on the kitchen shelf. Every morning I brewed 2 cups of coffee, one for me, and one that always went cold. In the afternoons, the sun poured through the window, landing on the brown envelope she'd left on the bookshelf. I never opened it. Not because I couldn't, but because keeping it sealed was my way of keeping her here, still watching over us, still whispering through the silence. People say time heals. It doesn't. It just teaches you how to carry the weight until the weight becomes part of the air you breathe. Michael called less often as the years went by. Once, maybe twice a year. He said work in San Diego kept him busy. His voice had changed faster, sharper, like someone who'd forgotten what slow conversations sounded like. I didn't blame him. Distance has a way of pretending to cure pain, but it only hides it deeper. Then one morning in March last year, my phone buzzed on the kitchen table. A text message. "Dad," I proposed. "Her name's Emily Pierce." I stared at the screen. The blue light reflected off my reading glasses. Below his message was a picture, Michael and a young woman standing on a California beach. She wore white, her smile wide, but measured her eyes. Cold, calculating. Like someone assessing value, not love. I stared until my coffee went cold. Then I typed back, "Congratulations, son. When you come home, I'd like to meet her." The word "seen" appeared under my message. Then nothing. 3 days later, he called. "Dad, we're really busy. I'll visit later, okay?" His tone was quick, professional, like he was making a customer call, not talking to his father. That night I sat at my desk. The house was quiet. The rain tapped gently on the roof. I reached for the brown envelope on the shelf. Dust had gathered on the flap. Inside there was a folded sheet of paper, Margaret's handwriting steady as always. Beneath it a smaller letter addressed to our son. I opened it slowly. "My dear Michael, If the day ever comes when you find someone to love, your father will give you this envelope. But remember, true love doesn't need proof of worth, only honesty. And if the person beside you ever makes you forget that, don't be afraid. Read this again. Love, Mom. My hands trembled as I folded the letter back. She saw it all, I whispered. Even the things I refused to see. I placed the envelope back in the drawer. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Margaret by the window. Her eyes tired but bright, as if she still had something left to warn me about. 3 months later, another message arrived. Dad sending the wedding invite. Vermont, July. No, I hope you'll come. No. Can't wait to see you. Just information, cold, polite, like a notice from a company I used to work for. The envelope was cream-colored, embossed with gold letters. Michael and Emily Pierce Cooper. Even the names looked expensive. I ran my fingers over the print, and for the first time in my life, I wondered if blood really guaranteed belonging. There are things you think you can never lose: your name, your family, your place at the table. But maybe you can. I walked to the closet and pulled out the black suit I hadn't worn since Margaret's funeral. The fabric smelled faintly of cedar. I hung it near the window and smoothed out the creases. People say time softens pain, I said to the empty room. For me, time just makes pain more polite. The hallway light glowed faintly across the table where Margaret's letter still rested. I looked at it for a long time, then whispered, "Don't worry, Margaret. I'll go, and I'll see for myself whether she truly loves our son." I used to believe no one could change my son so completely that I wouldn't recognize him. But all it took was one dinner in San Diego for me to realize how wrong I was. June 2024. I took the early flight from Eugene, 2 layovers, and landed just as the sky turned gold. San Diego smelled of salt and money sunlight, sharp and proud, the kind of sun that only the rich can afford to bask under. Michael met me at the airport in a white Tesla. He looked good polished, but his smile was tight rehearsed. "How are you, Dad?" he asked. The tone wasn't warm, it was polite, the way you'd greet a distant relative at a funeral. On the drive, he filled the silence with updates about his new life, his job at a financial firm, the 2-bedroom apartment, and Emily, the woman who understands me better than anyone. I nodded, letting him talk. He spoke fast, like someone reading off a resume. No question about my health or whether I'd eaten, just bullet points of success. I realized he wasn't talking to his father, he was presenting to an investor. Their apartment was on the 19th floor of La Jolla skyline. When the elevator doors opened, the smell of synthetic orchids and essential oils hit me like a wall. Everything gleamed white, sterile, silent. Emily opened the door before we knocked. White dress, perfectly straight hair, smile calibrated to the exact degree of warmth required for a photograph. "Mr. Cooper," she said, extending her hand. "So wonderful to finally meet you." Her voice was clear, perfectly measured, the kind of tone you hear on lifestyle podcasts or morning TV shows. Her handshake was soft, controlled. Not respect performance. A Cartier glimmered on her wrist. "Michael's told me so much about you," she continued. "You worked in banking, right? That's amazing. I really admire people who value financial discipline." It sounded like a compliment, but the words were hollow, polished smooth by practice. "Thank you," I said evenly. "And thank you for having me." "Oh, of course. Your family," she replied, her smile fixed in place. Dinner was already set, salmon salad, white wine. Everything color-coordinated, Instagram-ready. She talked a lot. About branding, about networking, about how she was building a lifestyle image. Brands are starting to notice me, she said proudly. Partnerships, social campaigns, visibility. It's all about narrative now. Michael sat beside her, nodding with a nervous grin, trying to look proud, trying not to look small. I asked, "What field are you in, Emily?" She tilted her head. "Marketing," she said. "But really, who isn't their own brand these days?" I smiled faintly. My wife Margaret was a teacher. She believed a person's worth was measured by how they treated others, not by what they wore. Emily took a sip of wine and smiled, eyes flicking toward me like glass catching light. "That's cute," she said. "But success is the best lesson now, don't you think?" Michael froze. The sentence hung in the air like a shard of ice. He gripped his glass and gave a strained chuckle, but he didn't meet my eyes. I didn't need him to. I could already see the invisible line that had formed between us, the distance filled with her words, her world. And I knew which side he stood on. After dinner, I excused myself and stepped onto the balcony. The night air was heavy with ocean salt and city light. Below the Pacific shimmered fractured reflections of neon and noise. I lit a cigarette for the first time in years, not out of habit, but to buy a moment of silence. Inside, soft jazz played, followed by laughter, hers, then his blending uneasily. I turned toward the glass door, and for a second I saw my reflection, a small figure framed by wealth that wasn't mine, a father out of place in his son's world. I was about to step back inside when I heard her voice, low, sharp, no longer the polished sweetness she'd worn all evening. "No, he's simple," she said into her phone. "Just mention his wife and he shuts down completely. He lives in the past, easy to control." The words hit me harder than I expected. Each syllable was a cold drop sliding down the back of my neck. She laughed quietly. "Trust me, once the wedding's done, everything will belong to us. He just needs to wait." Us. Not them, us. I stepped back into the shadowed hallway. She couldn't see me, but I could see her, her face calm, calculating, her hand tracing the stem of her wineglass while she spoke. Simple. That was me. And easy to control, that was my son. I stood there for a long time, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the muffled city outside. Margaret's voice echoed in my mind the way she'd once said, "The wrong person doesn't steal your child. They convince them to walk away." When I finally stepped back into the room, Emily was seated neatly on the couch, pretending to fix the hem of her dress, her smile already back in place. "Would you like some tea, Mr. Cooper?" I looked at her, calm, steady. "No, thank you." Then I turned to Michael. "I'll head to the hotel. Early flight tomorrow." He frowned. "You're leaving already?" "I'm tired," I said. "You two enjoy your evening." The city glowed as I rode back through La Jolla's coastal streets. Neon signs shimmered on the glass, cutting my reflection into pieces. I saw a man who looked older than I remembered, but sharper, not from anger, from clarity. That night in the small hotel room off Gaslamp District, I unpacked my bag and took out the brown envelope, the one Margaret had sealed 5 years earlier. The paper had yellowed slightly, but it still smelled faintly of lavender, her scent. I unfolded the letter. Her handwriting flowed across the page, gentle but firm. "If they forget who you are, remind them softly but clearly." Her voice played in my head, quiet and resolute. I closed my eyes. Outside, waves broke against the shore. Laughter from the street rose and faded, mingling with the hiss of passing cars. I sat there staring at the letter, trembling in the breeze from the fan, and I could almost hear her whisper again. "Don't stay silent this time, Stanley." I placed the letter back in the envelope and folded it carefully. The desk lamp cast a single slice of light across my face, half in shadow, half in gold. I didn't yet know what I would do. Only that when a father has lost everything, the truth is the only weapon left. And from that night on, I chose silence not as surrender, but as the calm before the reckoning. 3 months before the wedding, a gray afternoon in Eugene. Rain drifted down in fine threads, just enough to weigh the maple leaves until they sagged like tired hands. I had just come home from the last meeting of my career, my retirement day. No flowers, no speeches, just a few polite handshakes and the sound of doors quietly closing behind me. When I opened the mailbox beneath a pile of old magazines and grocery flyers there, it was a thick envelope edged in gold foil. The embossed letters gleamed under the porch light, Michael and Emily, the wedding celebration. I smiled faintly. My hand trembled. I knew this day would come. But when I pulled the card out, something inside me paused. To Mr. and Guest, no Dad, no Stanley, just a cold title meant for strangers. I turned the envelope over. Date, time, venue, Lakeside Resort, Vermont. Everything elegant. Every detail perfect, the serif font, the gold wax seal, the paper thick and heavy. All of it flawless, except for one thing: it wasn't meant for me. I sat at the kitchen table, the invitation spread before me. Outside, rain tapped on the tin roof, steady and patient. Each drop sounded like a clock counting down to something unnamed. That evening I called Michael. He answered on the 5th ring. His voice came fast, distracted, the voice of someone already halfway into another conversation. Hey, Dad. Sorry, I'm in the middle of something. You got the invitation right, I did, I said slowly. Except the name. There was silence for a few seconds, then a short laugh. Oh yeah. Dad, the wedding's being handled by Emily's team. They hired a professional planner. I didn't want to interfere. They're very professional, trust me. Professional. The word hit harder than it should have. People don't use professional to describe family. They use it when love has been replaced by contracts. I stayed silent. In the background, I heard her voice, soft, deliberate, the kind of tone that fills every space without needing to shout. Michael, are you done? The fitting's at 8. Then his voice again, lighter now, almost apologetic. Gotta run, Dad. We'll talk later, okay? The line went dead. My screen dimmed, reflecting my own face, blurred, older, uncertain. I kept holding the phone. The gold letters on the invitation gleamed coldly in the lamplight. People say that when your children grow up, you have to learn to let go. But no one tells you that letting go isn't the same as being erased. The next morning, I drove to a small cafe on Riverbend Street. My old friend Mark Bennett was already there, a retired lawyer. Same sharp eyes, just a little more silver in his hair. He looked up when I walked in. Stanley Cooper, he said with a smile. You haven't changed much except your eyes. They look older. I sat down, set the envelope between us. My son sent me this, I said quietly. Take a look. Mark picked up the card, ran a finger over the embossed gold letters, and gave a low whistle. Elegant. Expensive. Soulless, he said. Weddings like this don't need love. They just need lighting and photographers. I didn't respond. He leaned back, studying me. You know, he said softly, sometimes people don't fight you. They just crop you out of the picture. And that's how they win. I looked out through the rain-streaked window. The drizzle had stopped, but the pavement still glistened, reflecting a pale sky. Across the street, a father was holding his son's hand as they crossed through puddles. The boy laughed, splashing water, and the man laughed too, that simple, unguarded sound I hadn't heard from Michael in years. I turned away. Mark stirred his coffee slowly, the spoon clinking against the cup. "Still got that trust fund Margaret set up?" he asked. I nodded. "Locked up in the safe, untouched." He sighed. "You've always been the old-fashioned kind, Stan. You hold on to promises to honor even to pain. But sometimes the things you guard the tightest are the ones people use against you." I gave a dry smile. "You're probably right. But I don't know how else to live." Mark reached across the table, tapped the envelope, and slid it back toward me. "You know what your silence is, Stan? It's an invitation one they take as permission. If something ever happens—" He paused, half smiling, half serious. "At least you've got paperwork proving you're the last man in this family, still holding on to integrity." I didn't laugh. Didn't need to. There was truth in his voice, heavy, unvarnished truth, the kind that doesn't need to be said twice. That night back home, I set the invitation beside Margaret's photograph. She was still smiling in that old wooden frame, her eyes warm, patient, as if waiting for me to tell her another story before bed. "They sent the invite," I murmured. "No dad, no mom, just Mr. and guest." I lifted the card. The lamplight caught the gold letters, turning them into a blinding streak, a small, perfect wound. Her voice came back to me, then low and calm. "Don't let anyone decide your worth for you, Stanley." I opened the drawer, pulled out the brown envelope that still held her letter. My fingers brushed the faded ink. It felt like touching her hand again, thin, gentle, sure. I didn't read it. I didn't have to. Every word was already written somewhere inside me. Outside, rain started again, soft and rhythmic. I lit a candle beside her photo. The small flame flickered, reflecting off the glass frame, casting the invitation in a trembling glow. For a brief second, the light distorted the embossed text. It no longer read Mr. and Guest. It read, Mr. and Ghost. I smiled. Maybe that's what I was to them now, a shadow lingering at the edge of a perfect picture. But the thing about shadows is they outlast the light. It was a quiet morning in mid-April. The Oregon sky was the color of watered-down milk, pale, soft, almost too calm. I opened the windows to let in the breeze. The smell of coffee drifted through the house, brushing against the framed photographs of Margaret that still hung on the wall. On mornings like that, the house felt alive, but not with sound. It was the kind of silence that made you aware of every second, every tick of the clock echoing through the empty rooms. I opened my laptop. Old habits die hard. 30 years in banking had trained me to check emails before the second cup of coffee. Most of them were spam newsletters, ads, the usual noise. But one message stood out. From Northbridge PR Group to Cooper.Stanley@gmail.com. Subject, Rewire. Confirmation, Cooper Holdings. Those last two words froze me. Cooper Holdings. I hadn't used that name in years. My hands suddenly felt cold. I clicked it open. Just a short message attached. Please find the signed authorization for the transfer. Emily Pierce Cooper. Attached transaction record 0421.pdf. I opened the file, and in an instant, the air in the room changed. It was a transfer record, official letterhead, digital seal, signature line, Michael T. Cooper. Amount $42,000. Recipient Emily Pierce. Personal account. Note venue deposit. Lakeside Resort, Vermont. The glow from the screen reflected off my glasses, the numbers burning themselves into my eyes. Date April 21st, 2025. That exact day, I remembered Emily had posted online bragging about securing her dream venue. I zoomed in on the signature. The lines were wrong. Too smooth. Too soft. The T in the middle flat, lazy connected. Michael never signed like that. He had learned his signature from me when he opened his first account at 16. His T always leaned slightly to the left, sharp, deliberate. This one was forged. I leaned back in my chair. The printer hummed quietly as I pressed print. Each sheet slid out with a soft thud, steady, mechanical, like a heartbeat trying to stay calm. By noon, I was standing in front of Mark Bennett's office, an old red brick building downtown smelling faintly of burnt coffee and old paper. Mark had been a lawyer at the bank before he retired. He still looked sharp hair, white eyes, keen voice, dry. Email sent to the wrong Cooper. He asked when I placed the papers on his desk. I nodded. Probably meant for Michael's work address, McCooper. They typed Scooper instead. Lucky typo. Mark let out a slow whistle. Fate's got a sense of humor, doesn't it? He flipped through the pages, reading every line carefully. You're saying this signature's fake. I'm not saying it, I replied. I know it. Mark sat upright, serious now. If that's true, Stanley, this is fraud. She forged his authorization, moved money into her personal account. And if that money came from the trust fund Margaret left, it did. I interrupted him. The trust records show an internal withdrawal that same day. He exhaled through his teeth. Good Lord. You still have the paperwork in the safe. Untouched. Mark shook his head slowly. You should thank the universe you were a banker. Another man wouldn't have noticed. He poured coffee for both of us. What do you plan to do? I stared at the papers. I don't know yet. But this time I won't let it slide. Mark gave me a weary smile. Well, he said, at least you've got proof that you're still the only man in your family with any honor left. By afternoon, the rain had started again, light, cold, relentless. I drove home slow, the wipers sweeping rhythmically. The trees along the roadside glistened, each one reflecting headlights like cracked mirrors. On the passenger seat, the printed pages rested quietly, a silent, waiting explosion. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of whiskey. I rarely drank, but my throat felt dry as ash. I turned on the desk lamp and placed the documents beside Margaret's photo. Her face looked back at me calm, kind, unbothered by human schemes. Maybe this is still your way of protecting him, I whispered. Not with words, but with truth. I opened the safe and pulled out the trust fund binder. Thick paper, leather edges, faint smell of age and dust. Every year I reviewed it, one small ritual, one silent vow. And there it was, April 21st. Internal withdrawal, $42,000 USD. Everything matched. Perfectly. Horrifyingly. I could see it in my mind, Emily in her sleek office, smiling that cool, professional smile, signing Michael's name with a steady hand and clicking send without hesitation. People talk about love as if it's sacred, but some use it like a credit card swipe, spend, forget. I slid the documents back into the safe and sealed the envelope. Across the front I wrote, Trust Fund, Evidence of Transfer Fraud. When the lock clicked shut, it felt like my chest did too tight, firm, resolved. Night came quietly. The rain stopped. The yard glistened under the porch light. I sat on the front steps, the same spot where Margaret once kept her lavender pots. The air smelled of wet wood and thyme. Inside, the clock ticked softly. Outside, the world held its breath. I raised my glass and said quietly, "Everything comes down to numbers, doesn't it, Margaret? But justice isn't on a balance sheet. It lives in the silence, waiting until the truth is heavy enough to fall on its own." A gentle breeze stirred the curtains. The glow from the window lit the old wedding photo, me, Margaret, and Michael at 8 years old, smiling under the summer sun. I touched the glass, tracing the boy's grin. "Someday, son," I whispered, "you'll learn love isn't something you forge with an electronic signature." I turned off the porch light. The house sank into shadow. Only one flame remained, the small candle beside Margaret's photo, its flicker trembling against the glass like a silent oath I intended to keep. I left Oregon early on June 5th. The flight took more than 6 hours, 3 connections, 1 lukewarm coffee, and too much silence. When I landed, Vermont was bright, crisp, and cold in that strange New England way, sunlight sharp enough to make you shiver. From the Burlington airport, I rented an old sedan and followed the winding road along Lake Champlain. The water stretched out like glass, unmoving, mirroring the pine trees that stood sentinel on both sides. They looked like witnesses to a ceremony I no longer believed in. Lakeside Resort appeared after the final curve, a cathedral of glass and polished wood, white orchids draped along the balcony railings, champagne flutes glittering in the afternoon light. Guests milled around. Violins played somewhere unseen, and everything shimmered with that expensive kind of perfection, the kind that smells faintly of performance. Every detail was choreographed as if happiness could be planned by contract and priced by the hour. I parked, stepped out, and looked around. No one noticed me. Just another middle-aged man in a gray suit holding a silver-wrapped box. That feeling of being there but unseen was familiar. Except this time I knew what I was walking into. Not a family. A stage. At the front desk, a young woman smiled, polite, professional, detached. "Good afternoon, Mr. Cooper. You're here for the wedding," I nodded. She scanned the list, eyes flicking back and forth across the tablet. Then her expression shifted, a small, almost invisible flicker of discomfort. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said quietly. "Your name isn't on the main seating chart. You're listed under the secondary section." "Secondary?" I asked, my voice calm even. "Yes. It seems the main hall is full. You'll be seated in the hallway near the service door." Her tone dropped lower, as if she were afraid of her own words. "They told us there weren't any more tables inside." "I'm truly sorry, sir." I looked at her and gave a faint smile. "It's all right. You didn't do anything wrong." She hesitated, relief softening her eyes. "Thank you, sir." She handed me a name card, a small white rectangle with gold trim. "Mr. Cooper. No father of the groom. No guest of honor. Just Mr. Cooper. Neat, anonymous, disposable." The main hall was a greenhouse of light chandeliers hanging like crystal vines, candles flickering on mirrored tables, the air thick with perfume and soft music. I heard her voice before I saw her clear, bright, rehearsed. "Emily." "And this," she said with a radiant smile, "is Michael's father, Mr. Cooper. He used to work at a small bank in Oregon." She emphasized the word small. The group of guests, her friends, smiled back politely, the way people do when they've already stopped listening. I nodded. "That's right. Small, but big enough to hold trust." Emily's smile didn't move. She took a sip of champagne, her eyes glancing at me briefly, not with contempt, but with indifference. The kind that stings worse. To her, I wasn't family. I was a prop. A detail meant to fill an empty space in a perfect photograph. When the ceremony began, a staff member guided me to my seat, a small folding table beside the hallway right next to the service door, where waiters moved in and out with trays of wine and food. The air smelled of lemon cleaner mixed with melted wax luxury laced with something hollow. I sat down quietly, placing the silver box in front of me. The violin played a soft melody inside. Then the voice of the MC boomed through the speakers. "Please welcome the bride's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Pierce." Thunderous applause. Spotlights. Laughter. No mention of me. A young waiter passed by balancing a tray and whispered, "Sir, I'm sorry. You should be inside." I smiled. "Don't be. People sit where they're allowed to." He nodded sadly and moved on. The sound of glass clinking filled the air, bright, hollow, relentless. I stood up, walked slowly down the hallway. Light from the ballroom spilled through the glass, stretching my shadow long across the wooden wall, thin, almost transparent, like a memory fading. Then I saw it. At the photo area stood a sign, "The Cooper family, 3 people." I stared at it. 3. Michael, Emily. And in the photo beside the display, standing proudly between them, not me, her mother, Helen Pierce. They looked complete, whole, a family with no empty spaces left for me. People don't always push you out, I thought. Sometimes they just make the room so small you walk out yourself. I turned back toward the hallway. The air felt colder now. A breeze slipped through the service door, brushing the back of my neck. I walked past the last mirror at the end of the corridor, the one that reflected everything behind me. In the mirror I could see the ballroom, the chandeliers glowing, the guests smiling, the bride laughing, the groom raising his glass. And somewhere in that reflection, me, a man standing outside the frame watching from the edges of his own life. I looked at that image and realized something. They could erase my name from the invitation. They could leave my seat empty and replace me in the photographs, but they couldn't erase her. The woman who had taught me that dignity outlives memory. When the ceremony neared its start, I went back to my small table. The silver box glimmered under the soft light, its surface trembling with reflections, like it was breathing. Inside wasn't just a wedding card. It held the truth, the evidence I'd printed, the quiet proof that Margaret's trust still spoke from beyond her grave. I sat down, folded my hands, and looked through the glass at my son. Michael stood beneath an arch of white orchids, Emily's hand in his. He was smiling, the same boy who at 8 years old once held his mother's hand and promised to protect her forever. Now he was protecting someone else, and that choice would cost him everything. "It's all right, Margaret," I whispered. "I won't stop this wedding. I'll just let the truth do what it was meant to do." I took a sip of champagne. It was warm, bitter, the taste of restraint. Inside the chandeliers sparkled, the guests laughed, the perfect world held its breath. And I thought sometimes perfection is the easiest thing to break. All it takes is one small truth falling in the right place at the right time. The music from inside the ballroom spilled through the glass like perfume, smooth, expensive, and meant for someone else. A soft ballad played, "What a Wonderful World." Louis Armstrong's voice, rough, tender, heartbreakingly sincere, floated through the air. Then the MC spoke, his tone bright, practiced, too loud for truth. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, please turn your attention to the dance floor for a special father and son moment." I lifted my head. Through the glass wall, I saw Michael step into the light black suit, white shirt, everything perfect. The spotlight fell on him so sharply that for a second I had to squint. And in that flash of brightness, I realized the light wasn't showing me my son. It was showing me where I didn't belong. No one called my name. No one looked toward the hallway. I was just an old man in a gray suit, sitting beside a cart of dirty dishes, listening to a song chosen for another father. Each lyric cut a little deeper. What a wonderful world. Inside they danced. Outside I listened. A father-son dance. Just not mine. The kitchen door swung open beside me. A cold draft and the metallic scent of stainless steel rushed out. A young waiter, maybe 19, paused, glancing at me with a mix of confusion and pity. He set a glass of water on the table beside me. "Sir," he said softly, "they shouldn't have done that to you." I met his eyes and smiled faintly. "Don't worry, son. I'm used to it." He hesitated, then turned to leave. But just before the door swung shut, I heard him whisper, not to me, but to himself, "No one deserves to sit outside." That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. Not because it was kind, but because it was true. No one deserves to sit outside their own life. Inside, the laughter swelled. Crystal clinked. The song changed. I caught sight of Emily, white gown, red lips, radiant under the lights. She moved through the guests like she owned the air itself. I watched her speak to the cameraman, giving instructions, adjusting angles, choreographing joy. Every motion rehearsed, every smile deliberate. Then she turned and walked straight toward the hallway where I sat. "Father," she said sweetly, "I hope you don't mind sitting here." Her tone was light, polished, but her words carried blades. I looked up at her. No anger, no pain, just stillness. The kind of stillness that makes other people uncomfortable. I spoke quietly, evenly, "No. Some people need distance to recognize themselves." Her smile faltered. For a second, her eyes flickered confusion, maybe irritation, then she recovered, tilting her head. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean." "I know," I said. "Just like you don't understand how people lose everything for the sake of pretending to be polite." Her lips tightened. The smile turned stiff, wax-like, cracking under its own perfection. She didn't respond. Just turned and walked away, the echo of her heels sharp against the marble floor. The scent of her perfume lingered, sweet, heavy, artificial, blending with the metallic chill of the air conditioning. It smelled like something beautiful, trying too hard to stay real. The music shifted again from "What a Wonderful World" to "You Are the Reason." Applause filled the ballroom. Michael and Emily glided across the floor under a gold haze of light. To anyone watching, they looked flawless, the portrait of a happy ending. I watched my son lift her hand, kiss it gently. His face softened, but his eyes were far away. I knew that look. It was the look of someone trying to believe what they already know is false. People can hide anything behind a smile except the truth. It always finds its way to the eyes. I sat back down. The reflections in the glass merged their world, glowing behind me, mine dim and quiet. Two parallel realities separated by one transparent wall. A father and a son divided by silence. I felt like a gatekeeper to a memory already being erased. A middle-aged woman passed by, probably a guest from the bride's side. She paused, smiled politely. "Excuse me, sir. Do you work here?" I returned her smile faintly. "No. I used to work for something bigger than money." She nodded, not understanding, and walked away. I rose and walked down the hallway. Light from the ballroom spilled through the glass doors, casting a long, golden stripe across the floor, dividing the corridor into two halves, light and shadow. My shadow stayed on the dark side. I kept walking, glass of water still in hand, the chill seeping into my fingers. From inside, the MC's voice echoed. "Let's raise our glasses to the bride and groom." Cheers erupted. Laughter. Then the hiss of confetti cannons, a glittering rain of metallic ribbons falling through the air. Through the glass it looked like snow, beautiful, cold, unreal. The champagne flutes sparkled under the chandeliers, tiny fragments of light shimmering like broken glass. I smiled not from joy, but from recognition. I had reached the end of silence, that place where pain no longer stings, it simply waits. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't want to be seen. I was waiting for the exact second when everything they built so perfect, so polished, would collapse under the weight of its own lies. Silence isn't weakness. It's the breath before the storm. A breeze whispered through the hallway, ruffling the sheer white curtains. I set my glass down on the table. The music continued, distant now, faint, a soundtrack to someone else's happiness. I could no longer hear the melody, only my heartbeat, steady, slow, like a drum marking time before something inevitable. At the far end of the hall, the silver gift box I'd left earlier caught the light. Its reflection shimmered, trembling, as if it knew what it contained. Inside that box lay a secret strong enough to blow open the glittering lie behind the glass. I spoke softly, almost to the air itself. "Do you feel it, Margaret? The wind's changing. Just one more breath." I sat back down, watched the golden lights flicker, watched the curtains sway, watched the illusion breathe. And in the silence I could feel it. The storm was forming. Night fell over Lake Champlain like a sheet of gray silk, soft, cold, and endless. From inside the ballroom came the faint echo of celebration laughter, clinking glasses, the mechanical burst of camera flashes like little storms of artificial joy. I sat in the hallway, the light from the chandeliers spilling through the glass, landing on the table before me, where the silver wedding gift box still rested, perfectly still, as if waiting for its moment. I placed my hand on the lid. Cold. The metallic paper reflected my face, an aging man in a wrinkled suit, eyes sunken from years that had not been kind. A man no one noticed, sitting at the edge of his own son's wedding. I didn't know how long I'd been there. Time had stopped meaning anything. When the final song faded and the applause swelled again, I finally stood. I picked up the silver box and walked down the hallway. No one looked my way. No one asked where I was going. That night, as all night, I was invisible, a shadow moving quietly across their perfect world. The private lounge behind the ballroom was empty. Soft amber light glowed against the mirrors, the air still heavy with perfume and champagne. I set the box on the vanity table and slowly lifted the lid. Inside there was only a single folded card, the simple message I'd written weeks ago, back when I still believed this day might mean something. May you both find what your mother once called happiness. I read it again, then folded it back. The words no longer sounded like a blessing. They felt like an apology. From my pocket, I took out a second envelope. The real gift. Inside it, the printed transaction record from the trust fund. $42,000, a forged signature, a fraud written in the same elegant handwriting that had fooled everyone but me. Behind it, a photo, a blown-up image of that forged signature, each trembling pen stroke magnified the lie exposed in ink. And beneath it all, Margaret's letter. The paper had yellowed corners torn, but her handwriting remained steady, calm. I unfolded it, my eyes tracing every line I already knew by heart. Her voice came back to me warm and distant, like wind through spring curtains. If one day our son forgets what we taught him, remind him not with words, but by what he does when no one's watching. I folded the letter carefully and laid it on top of the documents. Then I sealed the box again, retied the silver ribbon, and with my old fountain pen wrote, To Michael and Emily from Dad. The ink bled slightly, a small smudge spreading across the metallic surface like a scar refusing to fade. I stared at it for a moment. Then I smiled. Some gifts aren't meant to bring joy, I whispered. They're meant to remind people that real joy can't be bought with someone else's money. When I left the room, the hallway was empty. The music from the ballroom still floated faintly through the air, muffled, distant, almost unreal. I passed the glass doors and glanced inside. Michael and Emily stood at the center of the dance floor, bowing to applause, their smiles bright enough to blind anyone who didn't know what lived behind them. Under the soft gold light, they looked perfect, two actors frozen in an advertisement for happiness. I stopped. For a second, the years folded back, and I saw my son at 12 running home in his school uniform waving a report card. "Dad, look." "I got an A," he'd shouted, breathless with pride. He used to say he wanted to make me proud. And I had been until I realized some people only needed to change the shape of their signature to sell their own name. I turned away and carried the silver box to the main gift table. It was covered with presents wrapped in red gold and violet glittering loud, designed to be noticed. I placed mine among them, quiet, plain, but heavier than all the others combined. Not because of what it was worth, but because of what it carried. For a while I just stood there. No one around. Only the sound of the wind from the lake slipping through the cracks of the glass doors. It carried the scent of orchids, sweet, suffocating, the kind of beauty that makes you want to leave. A young server walked by, stopped when he saw me. "Sir, would you like me to help carry that to your car?" I shook my head. "No. This one stays." He hesitated, eyeing the box. "It looks heavy, sir." I smiled faintly. "It is. The truth usually is." He blinked, unsure what to say, then nodded and left. I looked at the box one last time. The silver shimmered in the light, and for a moment I thought I saw Margaret's reflection. Her soft smile fading slowly, as if to say, "You did what was right." "Don't worry," I murmured. "I'm not seeking revenge. I'm just inviting the truth to sit at the table they wouldn't let me sit at. I don't need anyone to believe me. I just need the truth to show up once and on time." I turned and walked toward the exit. No anger. No regret. Only the quiet weight of certainty. Outside, the night had changed. The wind was stronger now, rippling the lake's surface, the reflections of string lights trembling across the dark water. The air smelled of cold metal and wet earth, the scent that comes right before a storm. Behind me, music and laughter spilled through the glass, the sound of a world still pretending it was untouched. Ahead, only silence, vast and clean. I stood at the top of the stone steps, took a long breath. The air burned a little, the kind of cold that wakes you. A single leaf drifted down from the trees, landing on the wet pavement, spinning once before sliding away with the wind. I watched it. Small. Fragile. Yet proof that everything eventually falls exactly where it's meant to. I walked to the car without looking back. Behind me, the glass doors closed automatically, catching one last reflection, an old man in a gray suit, leaving not in anger, but in quiet justice, leaving behind not vengeance, but a truth waiting to be opened. Chapter 9. When the truth was unwrapped. Laughter still echoed inside the ballroom. The air was thick, a blend of wine, wilted orchids, and heat from too many chandeliers. The night had reached that careless point where joy becomes noise. The final song faded. That's when the photographer, a middle-aged man in a black shirt, stepped forward, clapping his hands together. "All right, folks, Before we end, let's film a fun little moment, the happy couple opening a few gifts for the camera. Applause rippled across the room. Emily's smile flashed instantly, all teeth and control. Michael stood beside her, arm around her waist, his grin tight as a mask. On the gift table, dozens of boxes glittered under the lights like caged fireworks. Emily's eyes scanned the pile until she landed on one small, elegant, wrapped in silver. No brand, no bow too fancy, just quiet. She lifted it and laughed, her voice laced with mock sweetness. Well, this one's from someone who clearly had too much free time. A few guests chuckled politely. She turned the box, reading the tag aloud, to Michael and Emily. From Dad. The laughter stopped. The air shifted, a silence that carried weight. Michael's hand froze on her arm. He forced a small smile. It's from my father. Go ahead, open it. Emily smirked, rolling her eyes. Probably cheap, she whispered, not realizing her lapel mic was still on. The words echoed through the speakers. Clear, sharp, each syllable landed in the room like a slap. The chatter died. The guests looked up, faces half lit, half shocked. Emily blinked, frozen. Michael's jaw tightened. The photographer, unaware of the tension, urged gently. Go on, Mrs. Cooper. Keep unwrapping. Emily laughed weakly, voice trembling. Of course. I was only joking. Her hands tore the ribbon. The sound of paper ripping was deafening. Inside lay an old letter, the paper yellowed with time. Beneath it, a bank envelope, crisp and white. She frowned, pulled out the letter first. Michael's eyes caught the handwriting, familiar, unmistakable. His breath hitched. He reached for the letter and began to read aloud. His voice trembled, low and raw. If you ever forget the difference between kindness and vanity, read this again. Because true love doesn't begin with possession, it begins with gratitude. Silence spread through the ballroom like smoke. No glasses clinking, no whispers. Just the faint hum of the ceiling fans and Emily's shallow, uneven breathing. Michael lowered the letter. Under it lay the bank record First Horizon Trust account stamped and signed. Beside it a photo of his forged signature enlarged, so every false stroke screamed its truth. He stared at it, stunned, his face collapsing inward like a building realizing it's about to fall. The MC cleared his throat, voice unsteady. Perhaps we should. But Michael spoke first. Cold. Controlled, terrifyingly calm. Explain this. Emily turned toward him, eyes wide. This isn't mine. Someone faked this to humiliate me, fake, Michael repeated slowly. The exact day you wired the venue deposit from my mother's trust fund. The same account you swore you'd never touch. She shook her head, stepping back. You don't understand. But before she could finish, another voice cut through the air, steady, low, unmistakable. No one faked anything, Emily. All heads turned. At the back of the ballroom stood Helen Pierce, the bride's mother. Her expression was ice. She stepped forward, each word clear through the microphone near the MC's table. I warned you, she said softly. Don't let greed destroy your marriage or this family's name. Emily's face drained of color. Mother, what are you talking about? Helen didn't flinch. Her voice was steady, sharp enough to slice through the still air. You thought I wouldn't find out. I read every message, every plan. I know exactly what you've done. A low murmur rippled through the guests, small gasps, whispers, the sound of reputation cracking. Michael folded the bank paper hard in his hands. The sound of the crumple that was the sound of trust breaking in two. Some truths don't need to be shouted, I thought. They just need to arrive on time under the right light, so those who once laughed at silence finally learn to bow their heads. Emily stumbled backward, her hands shaking. This is his doing, his... She pointed toward the hallway. That old man, he hates me. He set this up, Helen's voice snapped cold and final. Enough. Then she turned to Michael, her tone softening, eyes weary but clear. Son, read your mother's words again. Because she was right, goodness can't survive where deceit lives. The room went utterly still. No one moved. No one dared. The chandeliers glittered above, casting light directly onto the silver box, turning it into a mirror. And in that reflection, if anyone had looked close enough, they might have seen the faint outline of a man standing just outside the frame, watching, silent but present. Michael's hands trembled as he held the papers. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. Tell me, Emily, what is this? It's just business planning. I only wanted to help you. Help me, he said, his laugh hollow. By forging my name. By spending my mother's legacy to pay for your wedding. Emily's tears finally fell, but this time the room didn't move. No arms reached for her. No sympathetic whispers. Only the faint sound of the paper she'd dropped, Margaret's letter sliding slowly to the floor. Her voice lingered in the air, carried by memory. If you ever forget the difference between kindness and vanity. And somewhere, though no one saw me, my voice followed softly through the walls. Then truth will remind you not in the way you choose, but in the way it must. I wasn't in the ballroom when it happened, but I knew every detail as if I could hear it through the walls. I could see it in my mind, Emily standing frozen under the spotlight, Michael kneeling picking up his mother's letter, his hands trembling, his eyes clear for the first time. And in that moment, the truth finally took its seat at the table where I had been denied a chair. The air inside the ballroom froze, as if every guest had forgotten how to breathe at the same time. The music stopped. Only the faint clang of a champagne glass rolling across the floor broke the silence before it shattered into tiny, trembling pieces. Michael stood across from Emily, his hand still clutching the crumpled statement like a verdict. The chandelier light fell hard across his face, sharp, cold, and stripped of everything soft that belonged to a groom. His voice, when it came, was hoarse, quiet, but absolute. You took my money. For what? Emily flinched. Tears pooled at the corners of her eyes, her voice thin and desperate, twisting between plea and defense. It was our money. We're getting married, isn't that the same thing? Michael exhaled a bitter laugh slipping through his teeth. No, Emily. That was my mother's money, and more than money, it was her honor. His words carried through the room like cold wind. No one moved. No one dared sip their drink. Emily tried to speak again, but whatever words she reached for got stuck in her throat. A beat. Then another. And finally, the first 2 tears fell. She stepped backward, her heel catching the edge of the tablecloth. The champagne flute tipped, spilling gold liquid across the white marble and onto her gown. It spread quickly, a stain that shimmered under the light, a dark bruise on something meant to be perfect. No one laughed. No polite reassurances. No, it's okay, honey. Just the sound of champagne dripping to the floor, steady, hollow, merciless. Emily knelt, fumbling for a napkin, trying to blot out the damage, but the harder she wiped, the bigger it spread. The white silk drank the spill like ink, and in seconds, what was once radiant became ruined. A flawless image cracked open for everyone to see. The MC stepped forward, mouth half open, but his mic stayed dead. The sound team didn't move. Nobody did. All eyes stayed fixed on the center of the room, on the bride who had finally run out of lies. Helen Pierce stood nearby. Her breath trembled, but her voice did not. When she spoke, it was barely above a whisper, yet every word carried. "You've destroyed yourself, Emily." The sentence dropped into the silence like a stone into still water, no echo, only ripples of realization. Emily broke. Her sobs came in jagged bursts. Her mascara bled down her cheeks like bruises. "He set me up," she cried. "He's hated me from the start. That old man, he wanted to humiliate me." Michael didn't move. He just looked toward the glass doors, where in the faint reflection he could see me. Standing still in the hallway, hands in my pockets, watching but not entering. I didn't need to. The truth was already inside. Michael's lips parted. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible, but someone's microphone caught every word. "No, Emily. My father doesn't hate you. He just handed you the truth. You decided what to do with it. Justice doesn't always need a gavel or a cell. Sometimes it only needs a mirror and the sound of a liar hearing their own voice for the first time." Emily sank into a chair. Helen moved closer instinctively, trying to help, but Emily slapped her hand away. "Don't touch me," she screamed. "You hate me too. You always have." Helen froze. Her hand lingered mid-air before slowly falling to her side. The fury in her eyes melted, leaving only grief, the kind that belongs to mothers who finally see what their children have become. Around them, whispers began to stir. Some guests turned away embarrassed. Others, the kind raised on scandal and screens, pulled out their phones. The pale glow of cameras lit up the dark corners of the ballroom, cold, voyeuristic light. A young guest near the gift table lifted his phone half out of reflex. At first he filmed to capture the chaos. But seconds later he realized he was filming a confession, a downfall too precise to be staged. Emily looked up, tears streaking, voice cracking, trying to reclaim control. "It's all just a misunderstanding. We were just joking." But her mic was still on. And the sound that came out wasn't laughter. It was the fragile, breaking sound of a pride dying in real time. I heard it all from outside. Every cry, every gasp echoing like waves across the lake. And no, I didn't feel joy. Only the quiet calm that follows a storm when there's nothing left to prove. Inside, Helen placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. Her voice was faint but steady. "Leave, son. It's over. Everything that needed to be seen has been seen." Michael nodded. He turned toward the door toward me. He didn't look directly, but I knew he'd seen the outline of his father's reflection in the glass. I turned away, stepping into the cold. The wind from the lake hit my face, carrying the scent of orchids and ash. Behind me came the muffled sound of chaos, a sob, a shout, the manager whispering for security. But to me, it was just background noise to one simple, inevitable melody, the song of truth doing its work. They say perfection is beauty, I thought. But I've learned that what makes people truly beautiful is the moment they face what they've tried to hide. She couldn't do that. And so no matter how white the dress, the stain remained. 3 days later, a video appeared online, 2 minutes and 34 seconds long, posted by a guest under the caption, "Bride exposed at her own wedding." Within hours, it spread everywhere. 2 million views, thousands of comments. That father is a legend. This isn't revenge, it's karma. He didn't raise his voice. He raised the truth. I didn't read them all. I didn't need to. The truth had done exactly what it was meant to do. And me, I had only opened the door and let it walk in. A week had passed since the wedding. Oregon mornings in June always carried that quiet kind of rain, the kind that didn't fall but drifted like mist searching for a place to land. The sky was a sheet of pale glass gray and slow, holding its breath. I sat in the living room, a cup of black coffee cooling in my hands. Margaret's photo still hung on the wall, her eyes calm, patient, knowing. She didn't need to hear the story to understand how it ended. 1 week. Long enough for news to travel. Long enough for justice to begin its work. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Mark Bennett, my old friend, the man who once said, "Silence is how people erase you from the family picture." The video's everywhere, Stanley. Emily's been suspended from work. Northbridge PR just launched a fraud investigation. They found multiple suspicious transfers, some matching your son's trust fund dates. I read every word, then took a sip of cold coffee. The bitterness didn't bother me. It reminded me things were finally turning the right way. I typed back 3 words, right on time. Then I set the phone down and stared out at the rain sliding down the glass. They call it revenge, I thought. I call it balance. Karma doesn't need help. It just waits for the right moment. By afternoon, the rain stopped. The light outside thinned to silver threads across the porch roof. I was polishing Margaret's old tea set when the phone rang again. A man's voice came through, firm, official, clipped. "Mr. Cooper, this is Officer Collins, Vermont Financial Crimes Division." He had the tone of someone who lived among facts, no sympathy, no malice, just truth. "We're contacting you to confirm Mrs. Emily Pierce Cooper has been officially suspended from her position. Her personal accounts are frozen pending a fraud investigation. Preliminary evidence shows she used your son's trust fund for unauthorized withdrawals." For a moment, I just looked out the window. Drops of rain still clung to the lavender Margaret once planted. "Right on time," I said quietly. The officer chuckled softly. "I take it you're not surprised." "I never am," I replied. "Not when truth does what's right." He paused, then said something that stayed with me. "Justice can be late, Mr. Cooper, but when it arrives, it's always heavy enough." When the call ended, I sat back in my chair. The room felt warmer, not from heat, but from the strange peace that comes when the world finally starts to correct itself. That evening, the wind returned. I reopened the box of Margaret's papers, the ones she'd kept in her old wooden chest. Her handwriting ran across the yellowed pages in black ink for Michael. "When he's ready." I touched the letters gently. Her voice drifted through my memory, soft but steady. "Sometimes the best way to love a child is to let them discover where trust ends." The phone rang again. "Michael." I stared at his name for a long time before answering. "Dad." His voice was hoarse, empty, like someone speaking through smoke. "I don't even know what to say. It's been a week, I haven't slept. Everyone's talking, the papers, my job, my friends." I said nothing. I let the silence do the work. "Why didn't you tell me, Dad? Why didn't you warn me?" I exhaled slowly. "Would you have listened, Michael?" He paused. "No, you're right. I wouldn't have." "You weren't wrong for loving her," I said quietly. "You were wrong for letting someone put a price tag on love." There was a soft sound, a breath that wasn't quite a sob. "Dad, I've lost everything." "No," answered. "You've only lost what was never real, and sometimes that's the only way to start again." Silence. Then in a voice small as rain, "Dad, I want to come home, just for a while. Back to Oregon." I looked out the window. The maple tree out front was shedding its first leaves of summer. The door, I said, was never locked. Night fell slow and quiet. I sat at my desk, the lamplight spreading over the papers like a soft confession. A new email appeared in the corner of the screen. From Chloe, northbridgepr.com. Subject: Thank you, Mr. Cooper. I opened it. I used to work under Emily at Northbridge. She humiliated me, stole credit for my work, and made me doubt myself. I almost quit the industry because of her. When the video surfaced and the investigation began, I felt something I haven't felt in years: relief. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Because of you, I believe in justice again. I can breathe now. I read it twice, not with pride, but with quiet recognition. Sometimes a small act at the right moment can make someone believe again. Karma doesn't shout, I thought. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't even need to be seen. It only needs truth and someone patient enough to wait for it. 3 days later, the papers made it official. Northbridge PR confirms internal investigation. Former employee Emily Pierce Cooper accused of forgery and misappropriation of private trust funds. All contracts suspended pending inquiry. My name wasn't mentioned. It didn't need to be. Everyone already knew where the first crack began. I didn't need the spotlight. The result spoke for itself. That night I sat on the porch. The air was cold, the scent of wet soil drifting from the Cascades. My coffee steamed gently in the dark. Out in the yard, the line where Margaret used to hang laundry still swayed in the wind. I could almost hear her laugh, soft, calm, the sound of someone who believed that good people always come full circle. And I realized I'd kept my promise. Inside, the old radio hummed to life on its own. Autumn leaves. The saxophone low and husky, the notes drifting out into the cold air, mingling with the wind. I closed my eyes and listened. Some battles need no sword, only patience and time. Karma doesn't take sides. It doesn't come when we demand it. But when it does, it carries the quiet weight of fairness. Tonight, I can hear it not in the wind, but in the sound of truth, whispering the names of those who thought it would never reach them. 1 month later, June in Eugene, Oregon, soft, clean, and quiet, as if the whole city had just been washed free of its noise. The maple leaves outside my porch swayed lazily in the breeze. Sunlight filtered through the branches, scattering across the old wooden deck in trembling gold. I sat in the rocking chair, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, the Eugene Chronicle folded open on the table beside me. On the front page, a headline printed in clean, bold letters: "The man they seated in the hallway." Below it, a black and white photograph, shot from the side. A man with gray hair sitting alone beside an open doorway, the light from the wedding hall cutting across him like a thin blade separating two worlds. No caption needed. Everyone knew who it was. Rachel Torres, the journalist, had written, "Sometimes you don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to sit long enough for the truth to speak for you." She continued, "The man didn't throw a glass. He didn't raise his voice or stop the ceremony. He simply sat in the hallway, the place they said had no room. And through his silence, he showed the world who truly deserved a seat inside that room." The article spread faster than the wedding video ever did. People shared it across every platform, captioning it with a single line: "Respect isn't demanded. It's earned in silence." I folded the paper and set it down, smiling faintly, not out of pride, but out of relief, because somewhere, somehow, the world had understood the point. That afternoon, I heard the sound of a car door close outside. Gravel crunched. Footsteps, slow and hesitant, moved up the walkway. When the porch door creaked open, I already had 2 cups of coffee ready. "Dad," he said softly. I looked up and saw in my son's eyes the faint reflection of Margaret's. The same quiet warmth, the same sadness when words failed. He sat across from me saying nothing for a while. Then he reached into his coat pocket and placed something on the table, a small, worn photograph yellowed at the edges. Margaret stood in the middle, smiling, her arms around us both. Behind us, the blue stretch of Crater Lake, the summer of 2005. Michael's voice trembled. "Mom would have been proud of you, not because you were right, but because you never stopped being kind." I didn't answer right away. I looked out toward the garden, where the lavender Margaret planted had begun to bloom again, soft purple, patient. Finally, I said quietly, "Your mother always believed justice doesn't need noise. It just needs someone willing to stand still long enough for it to arrive." Michael nodded, his gaze lowered. The sunlight caught his shoulders, and for a fleeting second I saw the boy he used to be, 12 years old, clutching his mother's hand, promising to be strong. Time had walked a long circle, and now it had brought him home older, humbler, but honest at last. I didn't blame him. Forgiveness, I'd learned, was sometimes the highest form of justice. We sat for a while longer. No words. Just the wind threading through the trees and the soft creak of the rocking chair. Then quietly he asked Dad, "Do you ever regret it?" "What you did," I turned toward him, shook my head. "No, Michael. I didn't destroy anyone. I only opened the door and let the truth walk in. If someone was swept away by it, it's because they weren't heavy enough to stand." He swallowed hard, nodded once. His eyes looked tired but clear. When he stood to leave, I added, "Live the way your mother taught you, humbly, and never let anyone buy your conscience." He smiled faintly, his voice unsteady. "I'll try, Dad." Then he walked back to the car. The tires rolled slowly down the dirt road, fading behind the line of maple trees. I stayed on the porch, listening to the wind move through the slats of the old wooden rail. Night fell soft and unhurried. The newspaper still lay open on the table, the print ink still carrying that faint new smell. I looked again at the final line of Rachel's article, a sentence simple enough to sound like truth itself. "Justice doesn't always roar, sometimes it breathes." Margaret would have smiled reading that. She always said, "When people fall silent, truth finally gets a chance to speak." Now I understood exactly what she meant. At my son's wedding, I was seated in the hallway. Today, I sit in peace. Justice doesn't always roar, sometimes it breathes. The last light of the day brushed across my face, soft and golden. Behind me, the little house held the echoes of everything that mattered, us, love loss, and the kind of silence that only peace can afford. The wind whispered through the porch railings, and in that sound I could almost hear Margaret's voice again, steady, patient, eternal. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like balance, like the world had finally exhaled. And have you ever been pushed aside by the very people you called family? Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's the strongest way to let justice find its way home. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe for more true stories where truth finally speaks in silence.